How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiega, here to wrap up the week, Friday, September 27th, to go over a lot of things on today's show regarding the NFL. Obviously, we're going to go over the game last night, Thursday Night Football, a pretty lackluster game, in my opinion. 20-15 was the final score. We're going to get into all of that and our takeaways from the game between the Dallas Cowboys and the Giants. Also, an interesting topic that I saw come up on social media, the average quarterback right now are outperforming the highest paid quarterbacks currently in the NFL just based on record. And for what we've seen, we're going to dive into that and maybe explain why that is and what could be leading behind the that situation currently, because it's very odd, very unfortunate if you paid a long-term contract to one of these quarterbacks and now bad record and all. We're going to dive into all of that and a lot more on today's show, to stay tuned for that. We're going to get into the games on Sunday and an injury report as well. So before we get started, if you have any questions, comments, or anything you'd like to share on today's show, we want to hear about it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. So don't hesitate to drop anything that's on your mind regarding the topics or just anything in the NFL. Don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. And if you want to make it sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that now using the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way. to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. We couldn't do this without all your guys' amazing support, so go ahead and use the new Super Chat feature. Get involved in the program after the show on any of the videos. But now with that out of the way, we could start by talking about last night's game, right? What did we see in this NFC East matchup between the Cowboys and the New York Giants, right? In my opinion, a snooze fest of a game last night. Just resulted in an ugly 20-15 game. Dallas go to 2-2. The Giants fall to 1-3. They are now last in the division, and rightly so, probably. For as disappointing as the Cowboys have been, I think it would have been a little unfair, or just not accurate to see them as the last place team, because I don't think they're the least talented team, and I don't think they're playing awful like that, right? The Giants also disappointed just because we kind of hyped them up a little bit on yesterday's show in the preview, and like how Devin Singletary was running the ball well, Malik Neighbors, a superstar, Daniel Jones coming off of an okay game, their defense playing great, but, in just this game, sort of looked at as a get-right game for the Dallas Cowboys, because not only people want to believe that they are better, that they should be better than what they're playing, but also their just sheer dominance they've had over the Giants recently, it fueled this idea that the Cowboys have to use this game to kind of kickstart their offense, their defense, anything, because the next wave of games that they have coming up are much harder. So this is the game where you need to get right, you need to win, and show everybody something. But of course, we really didn't see nothing. We really didn't see anything from either of these two teams, which made it a pretty boring watch, honestly. But looking at the game and some of the things we saw, I guess one of the positives for the Cowboys was that they started off as well as they would have hoped, right? Because that's been their issue, right? Playing from behind, and then you guys know the same spiel, right? They get down, they can't pass rush, they struggle to stop the run, and the game's over pretty early on, right? When they get down, they can't usually respond to getting punched in the face, but this time it started off differently. The Cowboys hit first. They scored 2 touchdowns in the first half, one to Rico Dowdle, one to CeeDee Lamb, and the biggest positive, I guess, technically, would be that they stopped the run. You look at the Giants' run game, pretty much all game, was 24 attempts, 26 yards, and they averaged about 1.1 yards per attempt, which is awful. It's embarrassing, because I think it says more about the Giants than the Cowboys actually, stopping the run. It's like almost the Giants like stopped themselves. It's like the Cowboys didn't really have to do too much to stop this pedestrian offense by the Giants, because the run game just wasn't there. They were getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage a lot. They weren't really gaining too many yards. And for a team that went into this knowing that the Cowboys, everybody knows the story, right? I just mentioned it. They can't hit back once they've been hit first. And I feel like the Giants were a bit too conservative with some of their approach. And while that might have to do with Daniel Jones, right, that is another question whether I mean, I don't personally believe Daniel Jones is a difference maker type of quarterback that can win you games. I thought that was pretty evident last night when he missed a couple deep throws. He was very efficient, right? I don't have the stats pulled up, but he had a pretty clean game for the most part, but there were some throws that got away from him, or that they just weren't thrown far enough for the receivers to be put in a good position. And that was almost the entire game wrapped up to one, right? You throw a deep pass, you kind of have the hope, kind of like the Giants have the hope of winning the game. Like, they're so close, it kind of gets you excited, and it always falls short. The Giants fall short every time, at least against the Dallas Cowboys. And in the past, it's been a non-contest whatsoever. But now, the fact that it was this close kind of gave me hope that the Giants maybe could get it together at some point this game, but that never showed up. So that was pretty disappointing, but it was a good sign to see, really, the Dallas Cowboys get the ball to CeeDee Lamb in various different ways. Just a lot of receptions going his way early on. They handed it off to him as well. And what's weird about this game, and one of the better things about the Giants in this game, was that they did a good job of controlling the pace of the game. But you have to score, obviously. You're not going to beat a lot of teams kicking 5 field goals. Try telling that to the Steelers, right? They kicked 6 and they still won. But the Giants defense, while it is good, I feel like they were definitely missing some other aspect of it to be really dominant, right? They were good. They played well. They only allowed 20 points, but this offense needs to do more, and they just need to score touchdowns, because you stall so many times. And in this game where the Cowboys are basically begging you to score a touchdown and kind of come back into this game, to kind of disappoint and not be more aggressive or just take better shots at scoring touchdowns was very disappointing. There was a lot of penalties. The Giants hurt themselves a lot with some holding calls, some weird calls also by the refs. You can't not point that out. There was some weird calls against the Giants as well, but it's not an excuse or whatnot. The Giants probably rightly so deserve to lose this game for not taking advantage of a very weak Dallas Cowboys team. And one of the negatives overall, other than Dallas kind of disappointing everyone and their hopes in this game, was that they did suffer injuries to Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, which is like the last thing you needed, obviously, right? Your 2 best players on defense now are questionable already heading into next week's game against Pittsburgh, so that's far from what you wanted out of this game. Not only did you disappoint, now you lose 2 of your best players on a very weak defense already. It's like both teams lost in this game, right? The Cowboys really didn't impress at all to kind of get you more excited about them, and the Giants, I think, just showed more of their inconsistencies, more of their deficiencies overall. And you didn't really learn too much from this game. Dallas still can't run the ball for as much as they won the game overall. They are still very predictable, very one-dimensional. Rico Dowdle, I don't know how many rushing yards he got, but I don't think it was much more than what the Giants got. And Dallas stopped the run, but that was more so on the Giants just being bad, in my opinion. And just going forward now, it's like almost you didn't play this game, right, for the Cowboys. It's like almost you could have skipped over this game, and we still feel the same way about them after the loss to the Saints, after the loss to the Baltimore Ravens. So it's very underwhelming so far for the Cowboys to, they want to be positive spirited about it. You want to have some optimism, like Dak Prescott kind of mentioned after the game, but it's you don't know where to stand right now on the Cowboys, or at least some people don't. Still kind of holding on hope for them. But what's interesting about this, when you really think about it, is how significant the idea of how the Cowboys won this game or how the Giants, lost this game, that told more of a story, right, than the actual scoreboard, right? You think 20-15, and if you didn't watch any of the game, you might think, wow, like the Cowboys must have played very well. And just their offense, couldn't have gotten anything going. But you watch the game and how it all played out, you're left with a very just bland, not good taste in your mouth overall from this game. And what's also the last thing I'll say about this before we move on is that, like I mentioned, it was a get-right game. It was more, from what we learned from this game, thinking of it as a get-right game, it was an opportunity for the Cowboys to kind of show that, hey, listen, we're still closer to all these good teams than you guys might think by beating the heck out of the Giants here by like 3 touchdowns or something, but they didn't do that. They barely scraped by, and now, rather than proving that you're closer to all the good teams, I think it goes to show how closer they are to being like one of the bad teams in the Giants and like the Panthers or whoever else you want to label as a bad team. I think that was really the biggest takeaway about everything, how Dallas really, I think, has convinced a lot more people that their chances of being, in the playoffs, questioning now that they might even be in the playoffs, is really surprising, and I think it was all encapsulated in this game. But it is what it is. A win's a win, right, in the NFL. That's what a lot of people will say. Good for the Cowboys to at least get back to 500, but the way they did it still left a lot to be desired overall. But we mentioned Daniel Jones in this segment, and he is going to be featured in this next segment in general about the quarterback position. The highest paid quarterbacks are off to a rough start so far in the year, while all the underdog, unlikely hero quarterbacks are thriving right now. Why that is and what does it have to do with, other than the fact that maybe you don't need a top paid quarterback to succeed in the NFL? We're going to answer that question when we return in just a few seconds.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to dive right into our second segment, regarding a little bit of what we talked about in the first segment, and I think it has actually a lot to do with the two quarterbacks, right? Dak Prescott, one of the highest paid in the NFL, and Daniel Jones, at the time when he got his contract, also getting a lot of money for that time. And apart from the obvious loss to the Dallas Cowboys 20-15, this entire game afterwards, and me thinking of how close the Giants really were to winning this game, I'm thinking about how the what-if scenario, right? About, you can't help but think about Saquon Barkley, right? What if he was still a New York Giant? What if they redid this entire offseason, made sure to keep Saquon, and what if he was still on the team with Malik Neighbors, with Wan'Dale Robinson, who played very well, with Daniel Jones, who hasn't turned the ball over too much. He's playing very safe, very preservative football. Would they have actually won last night's game with a guy like Saquon Barkley on their team? Would they have won against the Washington Commanders? And in an alternate universe, if they won those two games plus the Browns game, the Giants would be sitting here at 3-1, right? When you really think about how close they've been, and having a guy like Saquon on your team, how big of a difference that obviously has become right now. And you go back to the decision, right, in the offseason, like I mentioned, to not pay Saquon Barkley because he's a running back, right? And you decide to pay Daniel Jones. Instead of tagging Daniel Jones, let's say, and extending Saquon Barkley to the contract that he ultimately got with the Eagles. Probably unprecedented for the Giants and for a lot of people who don't really value the running back. But I think this season has showed us now that the NFL is kind of changing to a different sort of game plan makeup of some of these teams, of success, what success really is built off of. And maybe it's not just the idea of needing to have a quarterback, right? Let's extend the quarterback because we need a quarterback. If we need anything, we need the quarterback, regardless if we really believe in him. If we don't have him, if we have an average quarterback, it's better than not having one at all. And I don't necessarily agree with that. When you're talking about a lot of money being spent on these guys. And it's not really about Daniel Jones overall. I kind of started it that way, but just because it leads into a bigger point. He did all right last night, but it's rather about the Giants, not having the talent around them on this offense to really score touchdowns outside of Malik Neighbors. And you see it in these games where you're right there. You need somebody else to kind of step up when Malik Neighbors has like 3 guys on him over there because they know he's going to get the ball. Who else is going to step up? Who else is going to create that separation to get you over the line? And the Giants don't really have that. And I think it just goes back to this decision, not only by the Giants, but I think by a lot of teams being overly worked up about, needing to assure any quarterback that they want, regardless if they really believe in him or not, because the quarterback is everything. This idea that you need a quarterback regardless of what situation you're in, regardless of what the offensive line is looking like, who you have at receiver, what your defense is looking like. Is this head coach the right matchup for this quarterback? I think teams over the last couple of years have become overly obsessed with this idea, and it doesn't really sit well with me. And I think looking at it so far this year that the NFL has sort of become too much about just getting the quarterback without really focusing on the situation. And you look at the quarterbacks, like I mentioned, right? That's the overall focus of this segment, right? You look at the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks, right? The quarterbacks that maybe you're thinking, do they deserve that money? They ended up getting it, right? Whoever you think that is. But the quarterbacks right now, the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks, just I think 4 or 5 of them that just got it recently in the last 5 to 2 years or something like that recently. The top 10 highest paid quarterbacks right now have a record of 10-18 overall. The top 4 quarterbacks, highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, have a 1-9 record now so far through this year. Joe Burrow is 0-3, Trevor Lawrence is 0-3, Dak is now 2-2, and Jordan Love is 0-1. Jordan Love's been injured, but still losing record, right? While the average quarterbacks, the guys that maybe aren't as appealing, maybe the organizations and teams don't want to go out and put their necks out on the line for a Sam Darnold, a Geno Smith, a Justin Fields, Russell Wilson maybe if he was healthy enough to play. These guys, the 11th through 20th highest paid quarterbacks, are right now sitting with a 22-11 record so far. And then you take into account that record alone, right? It's not just based off the talent, right? That would be foolish, right? Like the 11th to 20th ranked quarterbacks are more talented than the top 10. I'm not saying that. I don't think that's the case. But if you look at it a bit more and how this year in the NFL has been so different because you take into account what we talked about, I think it was last week or just a few days ago, where the scoring is down. There's not a lot of passing. There's not a lot of big plays. You had Mel Kiper coming on ESPN saying how they should take away cover 2 because it's boring now. And I don't necessarily think it's boring. I think it's changing a little bit here. And the teams that are successful right now don't have these gunslinging 400 yards per game kind of quarterbacks, right? Unless you have the rare occasion where you have the Patricks, the Josh, the Lamars, I guess you could say, those 3 guys that are just head and shoulders, I think, above the rest. You can throw Joe Burrow in there in some conversations. But really, it's the teams that are not only taking advantage of that, but are running the ball efficiently. And then also, what's hugely overlooked for me is the coaching and the roster makeup and the buildup of the entire roster, right? Not just who the quarterback is nowadays in the NFL. It's not taking into account as much, whereas some teams, you see it now, the ones that are, quote unquote, overachieving or surprising you a lot more this year. You look at the Vikings, not the most eye-catching quarterback, right, in Sam Darnold. Not too many people expected that much out of him at all this year, but you look at what he has in place, right? Kevin O'Connell as the head coach, Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator. They revamped that defense as well. They have a great O-line. They have great weapons around him. No surprise that team is 3-0, right? Another situation, the Steelers. Mike Tomlin, great head coach. Arthur Smith, new offensive coordinator, panning out a lot better than Matt Canada. A great running game, a fantastic defense with Justin Fields, who a lot of people were already giving up on in Chicago. They're 3-0. And you look at elsewhere, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, surprising a team like the Lions, handling the Washington Commanders. They're 2-1. Not an awful record, obviously. And also, you look at some of the best teams right now in the NFL. I think arguably the two best right now are the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. And why do they look so unstoppable? Especially the Bills, who just lost Stephon Diggs, right? It's because they have this combination of both, or all the factors that I'm trying to mix in here, right? They have the quarterback, but not only they have the quarterback, right, but they have the great head coaching in Andy Reid, Sean McDermott, Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Bills. That's a big one. And great defenses on both sides, great O-lines, great running games as well, and also great weapons. Those are the epitome of what I'm trying to say overall here. Not everybody can get to that level, obviously, because they don't have a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes. But I think that's where the problem lies, right? Everybody would love a Patrick and a Josh, right? That goes without question. But I feel like everybody, or most teams in the NFL, why you see some quarterbacks fail or why you see some high-powered offenses on paper not work out is because I feel like teams try to skip steps to try and get a Josh or a Patrick so quickly. They skip the looking out for an offensive line, right? The Bears go out and get a bunch of weapons to think that Caleb Williams is just going to walk in here and throw the ball 50 times and they think that's going to win a game. They forgot about the offensive line, right? That offensive line is probably one of the worst in the NFL, and you see why they're 0-3, why Caleb's getting drilled on each and every play he tries to throw the ball. They have no running game. They've overlooked that, and, I don't think it's a surprise based on the point I'm trying to say, right? Other situations, it relates to quarterbacks starting too early, right? Skipping steps. Bryce Young, whether or not you think the Panthers made a mistake on sitting him, or do you think that Bryce is just not a good quarterback just based on the way they look now with Andy Dalton? I never even thought he should have been starting at all, because you think of the idea that Bryce is just going to walk in there and lead this very badly built team overall into a situation where they're not losing anymore without a good offensive line, no weapons, no defense, no running game. He was just thrown out there, and I think that's become a regularity now. It's become the norm where teams try to skip steps now, and it's not necessarily just boiled down to the highest paid or anything like that. It also, it chimes into this conversation, right? When you have that decision to come up, when you're trying to pay these quarterbacks, honestly, if you don't find yourself in a situation where you have the infrastructure around this quarterback, I don't necessarily think you have to or should pay him this amount of money, because it's not going to change anything that much. You look at the Cowboys and paying Dak Prescott. I know they did it very late and it inflated the price tremendously, but the idea, I guess the fear a little bit, right? Not a lot of people would take that risk of saying, you know what, we don't have the rest of the team right now to pay Dak this amount of money. Let's move on from Dak. Let's try to build this offensive line back up, try to find some more run stoppers, obviously, get some more weapons in here, and then we can think about a quarterback. Obviously, easier said than done, right? You're not going to get one the next year, highly unlikely, and for a team like the Cowboys to not have a quarterback, it's not good marketing, and it goes bigger than just football, right? I understand that, but you look at that situation, you look at another situation, I guess, with the Jaguars is another one where they pay Trevor Lawrence this amount of money, but they don't take into account the losses of Calvin Ridley, the offensive line not being very good, not addressing that defense. That defense, the defensive line is great, but the secondary is a mess. They're not very good in that aspect at all. So it kind of goes hand in hand, with the highest paid quarterbacks and how it's not necessarily a talent thing. I think the overall point I'm trying to make is that this idea of chasing the quarterbacks and wanting to get them locked down, regardless of how else your team is looking right now, I don't think that's the way to go about it. And I don't think it's a surprise that these other teams that opt for a lesser paid quarterback and they opt more money in to bringing in more pieces on defense, on the offensive line, on just anywhere else to have the quarterback as the final piece, it doesn't surprise me that they're successful right now either. And it's almost like, I'll leave this segment here with this example, right? It's like if you're trying to build a house, right? You got to have the foundation to that house ahead of everything, right? The foundation is everything, right? The foundation of a good running game, defense, offensive line, right? Those are usually the three pillars. Without that, the house is basically nothing. The quarterback is almost like the roof, the final piece you put on this house before it's actually complete and you have the Chiefs and you have the Buffalo Bills. The roof, obviously, if you don't have the quarterback, the final piece to everything, that house doesn't look right. It's always, getting rained on and things like that, obviously, right? Legitimate terms there. But if you don't have the foundation for however nice and sturdy that roof is, if you don't have that foundation, it's always just going to come crumbling down, and it's not going to work. It's not going to work if you don't have these things to build it off of. And that's where I think this idea of why the highest paid quarterbacks, right, they're not working out. Joe Burrow, he's a great quarterback, but why is he 0-3? The Trevor Lawrence's, I just mentioned him, great quarterback, right? But he's 0-3. I think it has more to do with the idea of the environment, the situation that the average quarterbacks, I guess you could say, are in, rather than, I don't think it's talent or anything like that, but it was so fascinating to me to see those records and, apply it now to this idea that a lot of teams, I feel like, are just trying to skip steps and trying to lock down these quarterbacks without really having an idea that you need a lot more around them than you can just have with them and expect them to kind of carry your franchise. It's never really going to work like that. And all those examples I gave, I think, support that reasoning. And it was just interesting to me that I saw that, this morning, and I had to come on here and talk about it because I've had that feeling for a while now, and I had to bring it up. But we'll leave that topic there. We could go on more and more about it, but we have to move on to our game picks this week for Week 4 in the NFL. I did part 1 yesterday. Now we're going to get into part 2. The rest of the 7 games on Sunday and how they're going to pan out, my ideas around them and who I believe will win is coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the show to go over some more topics around the NFL, and going back to yesterday's show, the last show we did part 1 of the game picks for all the games in the week 4 of the NFL. And now we have the remaining games, right? The remaining 7 games that I wanted to come on here and talk about and give my prediction on all of them. We have a couple of good ones here that I wanted to mention, so bringing it up right now for you guys to see. Starting in the top left-hand corner, obviously, of the screen, we look at the Jaguars and the Houston Texans, right? The Jaguars now traveling to Houston, the first divisional game for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and both teams coming off of losses, but the Jaguars, obviously, a bit more embarrassing, right? We don't have to talk about it anymore, 47-10 against the Buffalo Bills, and on the other hand, the Texans, a surprising loss because of the way that the Vikings sort of handled them and the potential that they have on offense. It was pretty surprising, if I'm being honest. I didn't think it was going to be that determining or that obvious that the Vikings really are a legitimate team in the NFL, but that's their last contest, right? The Jaguars still are trying to look for their first win, trying to find their identity on offense, really, because it's like the running game isn't really there with Travis Etienne. The passing game, the inconsistencies of Trevor Lawrence or the offensive line not giving him enough time, the weapons outside of Brian Thomas Jr., who is a rookie, right? And that's not ideally what you want to see. So that's kind of like what the Jaguars are dealing with right now. And for the Texans, Houston is a good team. I truly believe that, but I just think there are some things that come with a young quarterback. I think Brian Flores and some of the Vikings players said afterwards that, Brian Flores going up against a young quarterback still in his second year, they haven't seen every single, scheme or look that the defensive coordinators could throw at them. And I think that was a situation where this is a great learning experience for the Texans, and they're going to take that with them. But now this is more of a more favorable matchup for the Texans. I have them winning, obviously, because they're more talented. They have a better looking team at this point in the year. I think they know more so than not what kind of team they want to be and what kind of team they're set up to be from their defense, from their offensive play calling as well. I like the security I see there. And also for the Jaguars, there's no Tyus Campbell again. Evan Ingram, I believe, is questionable or is most likely not going to play. Their starting linebacker, Eliakon, he is doubtful, so he's probably not going to play either. Devin Lloyd, also another linebacker of theirs, didn't practice yesterday. So it's just too much. It's too much to overcome, especially on the road. It's very unfortunate, but I think the Jaguars will still remain winless. And the Houston Texans will go to 3-1. Then moving down the line there, we got the Los Angeles Rams traveling to Chicago to take on the Bears. Both teams are 1-2, but it's a very different 1-2 for both of them, right? Around the morale of each team for what it means right now, because you look at the Rams, they just got an improbable win against the San Francisco 49ers. Both teams very injured. Who wanted it more in that game was what it was going to come down to, and the Rams showed a lot of fight, showed a lot of their offensive makeup, I think, with Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford leading that charge with guys like Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson. Kyron Williams had a fantastic game as well, but, it's not Puka, it's not Cooper Kupp. They're your heavy hitters, right? They still won the game with a lot of their players being out. Against the 49ers, too, who are obviously one of the better teams, whereas the Chicago Bears are coming off of another loss, a two-week losing streak now for the Bears. And, the way Caleb's played, I kind of harped on it a little bit in the last segment. There's a lot that offense is dealing with offensive line-wise, and just not figuring out yet for Caleb, and it's not really clicking yet on all cylinders. To be expected as a rookie, but they're back at home now. It looks like Keenan Allen will play, which will be a huge addition to just the struggling offense, right? I don't think they need to throw the ball anymore, but it's going to help in those times that he is throwing to have a guy like Keenan Allen, obviously. And going into this matchup now, I don't like the fact that Chicago gave up 2 touchdowns and 110 rushing yards to Indianapolis last week, and the way Kyron Williams played this past week as well. I'm liking the Rams more and more. You know, it was tough because the Chicago Bears do have a good defense. They only won their only game of the season when playing at home, but I don't like the trend that I'm seeing from Chicago, not running it enough and being susceptible against the run as well. So that's why I think, and I truly believe that the Rams will win. I think Kyron Williams is going to have another good game. And the Rams defense also proved to be pretty stubborn at times. When the big moments came, they made the stops against the 49ers. So I like the fact that they were able to do that. And I think Chicago still isn't there quite yet to kind of get over these struggles. So I'll have the Rams winning in this one. And also now, moving down the line, a very fascinating game here between the Commanders and the Arizona Cardinals. And I think none more fascinating than Cliff Kingsbury facing off against his former team. The former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, now the offensive coordinator for the Commanders. It should be another offensive showdown because I think both teams' defenses aren't particularly where you'd like them to be at this point in the year. They haven't been dominant by any means. So the offenses, on the other hand, you know, you're talking about Kyler, Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner. I know Trey McBride was dealing with a concussion. I'm not sure if he's going to play, but still, those are three guys that are very talented, very capable of carrying this offense. And on the other side, Jaden Daniels just announced himself to the world. Terry McLaurin just had a nice day. Brian Robinson, I think, is getting a bit better with more experience going on. I feel like this is going to be a shootout of sorts here. And I feel like the Commanders are coming in here. They were heavy underdogs when I saw it this morning, and I don't really understand why. I know they're on the road, and maybe the level of offense isn't sustainable per se week to week, but I like what Jaden Daniels showed overall. Just when you know you have one of those guys, and I think Jaden is certainly one of those specially talented, gifted guys, it's hard to kind of bet against them in my opinion. So I like Washington's offense. I know they're rolling right now, even without Austin Eckler. He's been ruled out with a concussion. They look great against Cincinnati. I'm going to go with Washington and the Commanders to keep this up. Jaden Daniels has another great game, and they're going to win and go to a resounding 3-1 in the NFC East. Would you have believed that to start the year? Probably not. Then you look at the other side now of your screen, the New England Patriots at the San Francisco 49ers. 2-game losing streaks for both of these teams. The Patriots are coming off of a long break where they thought long and hard about getting smacked around by the Jets, and San Francisco lost a game that they probably should have won. So bad taste in each of their mouths right now, but still, I think this is more so the New England team that we were all kind of thinking we would see this year, and I don't think New England has as big of plays, big-time plays down the field that the Rams needed to win that game. I don't think the Patriots are really capable of doing that at this point. It's more methodical, more slow with them with the running game. But I'm pretty sure George Kittle's going to come back. He participated yesterday in practice, so San Francisco should have enough. They're back at home now after a 2-game road trip. I think going back home, Brock Purdy played well without most of his weapons. Give me the 49ers in this game to go back to 500. And then looking at the last 3 games here, the Browns are dealing with a lot of injuries, and so are the Raiders, right? I think my memory serves me right, Jedrick Wills isn't playing, Jack Conklin isn't playing, and there's one, David Njoku is not playing for the Cleveland Browns. 3 of their biggest players on offense aren't playing. And on the other side, Devontae Adams has been ruled out with a hamstring injury, and Max Crosby is also not playing with a ankle injury, I believe. So a lot of significant players not playing in this game. It kind of changes up what I had on here because I had Las Vegas barely winning, and now I'm really not sure who to go with. This might be the most random matchup between 2 teams that I have no idea what kind of version I'm going to see each and every Sunday. I think I'm still going to stick with my pick, the Raiders, just because I really don't like what the Browns have been showing me. With the offensive line already being banged up and now losing your 2 tackles like that, I don't think that's a recipe for success. So I'm still going to go with the Raiders. I think Brock Bowers, Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Myers, I think that should be enough to get the win. in this game overall. Then the final two games here, the Chiefs traveling to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. I'm going to go with the Chiefs here, mainly because the suspension of Derwin James, he shouldn't be suspended. It was pretty bogus of the NFL to suspend him for that hit, but it is what it is. He's not going to play. Also, their star rookie right tackle is also not going to play, Joe Alt. He's been ruled out with an ankle injury. And Justin Herbert, the injury around him, how's his ankle feeling? He didn't finish the game last week, so how healthy is he going to be? Not the recipe you need to take on the Chiefs for as many injuries as they have with Pacheco and, I'm losing it now, Hollywood Brown and guys like that on offense. It's too much for the Chargers, especially because they are a run-heavy team, built up on defense as well. Having those two guys not playing in this game, I think is going to make the difference. So the Chiefs will win this one, still remaining undefeated. And lastly, we already gave our picks here for the Bills and the Ravens. I'm going with the Bills for the main reason that I said that the Baltimore offensive line sort of worries me. I didn't like how they defended against the Chiefs defensive line. They kind of gave up a lot of pressure to Chris Jones, at least at the start. So Greg Russo, Von Miller, Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa, those guys have really proven that they can get home to the quarterback just rushing those four. And the Bills offense is really just clicking right now. I don't know who or what it's going to take for anybody to throw them off. The Ravens have great players on defense, but passing-wise, it hasn't looked as sticky, as lockdown-worthy, right, as years prior, right? So that way, I'm going to lean towards the Bills on the road to stay undefeated, and the Ravens will fall to 1-3, and that will do it for all the games on Sunday. We didn't get into the Monday games, obviously. That'll be for Monday when we preview those games, but that's everything on Sunday. Let me know what you guys think on any picks that you want to make or reacting to any of the choices that I made as well. But that'll be that segment. Now moving on to two of the last ones here. A very interesting comment by Justin Jefferson on Jair Alexander. The Minnesota Vikings will take on the Packers this week. That'll be the most interesting matchup in that game. We're going to go over what Justin Jefferson said, and also with these two teams being one of the best or two of the best in the NFC, what is going to be more of a determining factor? Is it going to be the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball for these two teams? We're going to answer that in just a few seconds. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here to dive into this fascinating quote that I had to share with you guys today, revolving around this matchup between the Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. And two teams in the Packers and the Vikings that have been impressing a lot so far through the first 3 weeks of the NFL season for a few reasons, right? You look at the Minnesota Vikings first, still obviously undefeated. Sam Darnold, a revelation story this year in the NFL. The defense also, likewise, another revelation for how well they're playing, how well they're being coached by Brian Flores. And the win, back-to-back wins, I should say, against Houston and against the 49ers. Back-to-back weeks at home, having two of the best contending teams playing against them and playing very well against them, both on offense and defense, have really impressed me. I'm jumping on the Minnesota Vikings bandwagon as a believer in them, that they can do something special this year, barring any major season-ending injuries or anything like that. I like the makeup of their roster, I really do. And the Packers, likewise, very impressive on the other side because they're 2-1 despite the loss of Jordan Love, right, in Week 1. Luckily, it was only sort of a short-term injury. He's missed a couple games now, but it could have been much worse with that knee injury. So they went 2-1 despite that. So that's very encouraging. Their game planning and their schemes with how they use Malik Willis, getting the best out of him, making him look like better than some of the starting quarterbacks we've seen at some points this year. I think that's a credit to Matt LaFleur, their offensive scheme and everything that they run with him, being able to adjust to what Malik Willis does right. I love that. I love that the Packers are able to do that. And again, it just goes to show more about them and their capabilities on that side with the coaching and whatnot. These two teams are very alike in a way because of the coaching, the offensive-minded coaching, and how well they're approaching and how well they're performing so well in the season. So that's why this matchup this week is going to be great, I think, because of all those reasons I mentioned. But also you have Aaron Jones coming back and facing his old team in Lambeau Field. Both are looking good, but also because another matchup that I would love to see, and I'm very eager to watch it, is going to be between Justin Jefferson and Jair Alexander. Both have had great performances against the other one. Jair didn't play last year, plus Justin Jefferson also missed a lot of time with his injury, so that's the main reason we didn't get to see it that much last year. But it goes back to 2022 because the first time they matched up, Justin Jefferson had 184 yards with 2 touchdowns, which is insane. In their first matchup, then Jair got back at him in their second matchup where he only had 15 receiving yards. So, each one of them has had their victories, their battle victories. The war continues on. And I love this quote by Justin Jefferson. I'm not being hypocritical or anything. I know I've been critical of Cam Taylor-Britt and what he's had to say ahead of games and how I haven't been a fan of that, which I'm not. But I think the way that Cam Taylor-Britt approached it kind of talked down about the opposition, whereas Justin Jefferson in this quote, if I could get it up, here we go. If Justin Jefferson, if you look at it, the difference here is he's kind of just backing himself, confidence in himself. He's not really saying Jair's trash or anything. Looking at this comment by Justin Jefferson this week, when they asked him about Jair Alexander, trying to get him riled up and trying to get in his head, he said he likes to do that stuff to get inside someone's head. I'm not really tripping on that. I'm excited for the matchup, and he also mentioned afterwards that he feels that Jair cares about this matchup more than he does, ultimately, is what he said. And it's not anything like before referencing Cam Taylor-Britt. It's not like he called Jair trash. It's not like he said the Packers, like he's just going to destroy the Packers. He just simply said he's backing himself. He's not really worried about what Jair's trying to do outside of just playing football. I have no problem when it's to this level, right? Just backing yourself, that's no problem with two competitors backing each other, backing themselves up. So I love this quote for that reason, and also for all the offense that will be present with Justin Jefferson, obviously, with Aaron Jones. Jordan Addison is supposed to play this week for the Minnesota Vikings. And then on the other side, you look at the Packers with Josh Jacobs, Christian Watson, Jalen Reed, Jordan Love potentially if he plays, Sam Darnold, I'll throw him in as well. There's a lot of firepower in this game, but also on the defensive side of the ball is very impressive as well. You look at Brian Flores, I keep mentioning him because of how well he's got this defense playing schematically and the players that they have as well. I love Stephon Gilmore being added to this secondary. Jonathan Grenard had a great year last year. He gets his bag, and now he's producing yet again. I love Dallas Turner being drafted here to kind of pair up with Jonathan Grenard. So they got these sort of guys, the Alex Van Ginkels, the Blake Cashmans of the world, to really make a solid defense for Brian Flores and give a lot of people trouble. And on the other side as well, the Packers too have shown very good defensive performances as well. And that's where I think this defense, the defensive side of the ball in this matchup, for how evenly balanced they are, I think that side is going to be more significant in this game in determining a winner for a couple of reasons, right? You look at Green Bay's defense and how They produced turnovers. They produced a couple against Philadelphia. They completely shut down and frustrated Indianapolis with their young quarterback throwing 3 interceptions. They only gave up like 10 points in that game. And also just last week against the Titans, you have 2 interceptions again off of Will Levis. He fumbled. They recovered the ball. So they're forcing turnovers right now. Both defenses and offenses are playing at a very high level, and it makes for this matchup to be so good, I believe. The NFC North is going to be such a great division this year. If the Bears can pick it up a little bit, that would be great. But regardless of that, the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings, and how well they've looked, that's why I believe this matchup, this game is going to be one of the best games of the week, along with Buffalo and the Ravens, if you want to throw that in there. But I really think that this game is going to have a lot based on the reasons and the storylines that I just kind of gave out. But the defense is really what stands out to me. Whether or not Jair can sort of get in Justin Jefferson's head and rile him up, take him out of the game, then what does Sam Darnold do from that point on? Does he have another option to go to? How much is Jordan Addison, involved in this game? He had a great rookie year, has been out of the lineup so far with an ankle injury. So will he be able to step up? And who do I ultimately give the edge to? Because it's very evenly matched and it makes for an even better contest. But to me right now, I'd give a slight edge, like I said before, to Minnesota, because I believe we'll see Malik Willis, if he is playing, struggle for the first time against Brian Flores. And I know Jordan Love has a potential to play in this game. I would love to see him play. I'd love to see the Packers get back to 100%, but I don't know if they're willing to risk him yet. I don't know how capable he is right now with being close to 100% or being close to kind of protecting himself from any sort of re-aggravation of that injury. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Malik Willis starts again. And because of that, I believe we're going to see the same sort of struggles and the same sort of, pauses from CJ Stroud like we saw last week with CJ Stroud, this week with Malik Willis, when looks and so many just different scenarios and coverages and everything at Malik Willis. I think we're going to see him struggle for the first time, because against the Colts, he was all right. He had a great rushing game. They had a great rushing game overall. But in the second game, he played very well, making some good throws to the Packers wide receivers. But in this one, I think it's a different sort of game now, where we're talking more about the mental side, the studying, the game planning side of things, that I just don't know Malik Willis has enough exposure to those sort of things to have another great performance. That would be my biggest thought and my biggest doubt with Malik and the Packers in this game. I feel like it is going to cost them ultimately, and with how well the Vikings are playing on offense, and obviously I just mentioned the defense as well, I'd like to give the slight edge to them in this one. I'm pretty sure I picked them to win in yesterday's part 1 of the game picks anyway, so just to come on here and explain it a little bit more, this comment on your screen kind of had me thinking about, how evenly matched these two teams are, and how, oddly enough, it's going to be coming down to the defense and how significant either of these teams playing on defense is going to make the overall difference in this game. So those are my feelings on it. I love this sort of trash talk. I think it makes it even better, and we're going to see on Sunday who comes to play and who's ready to kind of back up that talk in the matchup, the first NFC North matchup for the Green Bay Packers. But with that being the case, we'll leave that there. We have one more topic to get to, just a last-minute injury roundup for you guys. If any fantasy implications are applied here, or just your teams and how their best players are looking, we're going to go through that in just a couple seconds right after this break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Just to get to you guys on here, a last-minute injury update on some of the biggest news injuries obviously going around in the NFL. We got some pretty big ones here. We got some pretty big ones that I had to mention on here. I made this segment in the morning, and now we've had some further developments on how some of these injuries are looking. So, starting off with one of the bigger ones, like I mentioned, relating to the last segment we had, Jordan Love continues to progress towards a return this week, potentially. He remains still as a limited participant in practice so far, and it's just trending towards being more of a game time decision, really, at this point, because Love said that he was close to actually playing last week against the Titans, but they held off, obviously, and it panned out. They handled that game pretty easily, but he went through the pregame warm-up last week. He felt good, but still the team is being a little bit cautious with him, rightly so. And I just don't know if this is the week yet to kind of just throw him out there against one of the best teams in the NFL. I know he'll want to play and everything, but it's tricky right now. It's tricky with this, so that's that on Jordan Love. Moving down a little bit further, we look at George Kittle. He had his second consecutive limited practice yesterday, trending towards playing yet again after missing last week's game. He is trending to coming back this week against the Patriots. Trent Williams is another one that was banged up in the game last week against the Rams. He actually went off into the locker room, and he missed some time this week with an illness, but he was a full participant yesterday. Almost certain he was listed as questionable from the latest updates I've seen on here, so he is questionable, but I do expect him to play. And Deebo Samuel was limited yesterday. He was rehabbing on Wednesday, so he actually couldn't be out there. But he is officially listed as questionable as well. And looking at some of these other ones here on my phone, because they are more updated, the Texans situation. The Texans have ruled out Tank Dell, Dameon Pierce, and have Joe Mixon listed as questionable. Joe Mixon could potentially return. He returned to practice today, only limited as well, and so he's questionable for Sunday. And with the situation with Tank Dell, I actually wasn't too aware of that. He's actually out with a chest injury, and so that's, could be more specified, obviously, but he's going to be out with a chest injury. Then you look at also their safety, Jimmy Ward. He has also been ruled out with a groin injury, while their other receiver, Nico Collins, is reportedly good to go after being on the injury report yesterday with a hamstring injury. It looks like he is ready to play as well. Elsewhere, with notably the Cleveland Browns, like I mentioned before, there's going to be no Jedrick Wills, no Jack Conklin, and no David Njoku in this week's matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Browns continue to struggle with that offensive line, so that piece of news isn't great to hear. More positive news also for the Eagles, however, because A.J. Brown and Lane Johnson were full participants in the Eagles practice for the first time this week, actually, today. So that's great news. It looks like they're trending to playing. I haven't seen anything else thus far, but it looks like A.J. Brown and Lane Johnson, at least, here we go, are looking like they are going to play. A.J. Brown is listed as questionable. DeVonta Smith is officially ruled out with a concussion, but A.J. Brown is questionable with that hamstring injury. He hasn't been able to play in the last 2 weeks, but he suffered it in practice 2 weeks ago. He's missed a couple games before now. So it looks like now they are looking as optimistic to him playing as ever. So look out for him. They're going to definitely need him if they're not going to have DeVonta Smith, and having A.J. Brown back would be huge, but those hamstring injuries are always a bit tricky to deal with, so kind of monitoring him and how he feels tomorrow, if he feels any soreness or tightness in that hamstring, you don't want to risk it, so that is the latest updates on that. You look elsewhere now, the Jets linebacker, C.J. Mosley, injured his toe in week 2 against the Tennessee Titans, and he still has not returned to practice. Yesterday was the 5th day in a row that he's missed practice, so he's likely going to be out again this upcoming Sunday when they take on the Broncos. It's not too big of a loss, I guess I would say, not because of who CJ is, right, and what he means to the defense, but I think going up against a rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, in New York on that much rest, I think they're going to handle their business anyway, with or without CJ Mosley, so he's probably going to be out. He hasn't officially been ruled out, but missing so much time at practice doesn't paint well. And obviously Morgan Moses, we talked about it briefly at some point this week. He's already been ruled out, obviously, for a couple weeks while he deals with that knee injury. And elsewhere, this time in Los Angeles, we mentioned Justin Herbert. We don't really know what his situation is looking like, but he actually said this week that his ankle is feeling a lot better than it did last week, and it's kind of odd because, you know, he re-aggravated it and was seen in a walking boot after the game this past Sunday. So now it's looking like a more optimistic view on it. The Chargers are definitely going to need Herbert, obviously, outside of being their quarterback. If they're not going to have Derwin James on the defensive side of the ball, they're not going to have their starting right tackle in Joe Alt, is obviously going to be huge. So I don't like the fact that, you know, they're going to play the Chiefs and Herbert being a little bit hobbled, but they're feeling pretty optimistic about it from everything I've read. He's had 2 days now of being limited in practice, so we'll see how they look tomorrow, right, in the final sort of walkthroughs through everything. Still, another game time decision like Jordan Love. I feel like we're not going to get that until the morning of, and we'll see closer to game time. And then elsewhere, some of the quick hitting injury news around the NFL elsewhere. I mentioned DeVonta Adams and Max Crosby. Both of those guys have been ruled out by the Las Vegas Raiders. DeVonta Adams was limited yesterday with a hamstring injury. There was no injury report on Wednesday. He appeared on it yesterday, and now he has been ruled out. So either it's definitely a lot more significant than we were originally, you know, thinking that it was, but it could also potentially be that they're just being precautious with it as well, right? You don't want to... The hamstring injuries are something that is super just annoying, quite frankly, and also just pretty nagging. You don't really know until how it's actually feeling, and so it could be either one of those scenarios, but DeVonta Adams is definitely not going to play. A huge loss for the Raiders on that side of the ball. And also on the other side, Max Crosby with an ankle injury. He missed his second straight day of practice yesterday, and now he's been officially ruled out today. At some point this afternoon, their two biggest stars, arguably, are not going to be playing in this game. So I still picked them to win just because we talked about the Browns, and their injury situation isn't looking that much better. So much like the 49ers and the Rams last week, this is going to be the nursery, the medical game where we're going to see some new players probably out there that we weren't expecting to see, but that's where those situations lie right now. For Detroit, two pieces of news here, good and bad. Sam Laporta didn't practice yesterday because of that sprained ankle, but he was a full participant today in today's practice, and with the Lions playing on Monday against the Seattle Seahawks, given that extra time, I wouldn't be too surprised to see Sam Laporta out there. I wasn't expecting him to play or be a full participant in practice today, but that's what the reports say. He was out there fully, so he is listed as questionable right now for the Lions, and it's going to be a big one. Two NFC opponents meeting, the Seahawks at 3-0 and the Lions at 2-1. It's going to be a game for Sam Laporta. You'd love to have him out there, so we'll see that one again. Another game time decision, I'm sure. And lastly here, for the Lions as well, like I mentioned, the negative part about this news is that their center, Frank Ragnow, has already been ruled out with a pectoral injury. He was close to coming back. Dan Campbell talked about how he really was pushing to play this week and how stubborn he was about, you know, being reluctant about not being ruled out. But ultimately, he isn't going to play. He hasn't made it back recovering from that pectoral injury. So obviously it's not devastating because it's not season ending, but he should be back, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. With how close he was to playing this week, I'd expect him out there next week or at the latest the week after that. But that is all the injury news I have for you guys on today's episode. And with that, we're going to close out today's show. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show as always. Check out both YouTube channels as well to catch more coverage and content around the NFL and this show. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be talking more about the NFL each and every week, more coverage, more storylines, and everything with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you for joining me yet again, and I'll see you guys back on here on Monday after another week of the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that